welcome to Precious Pursuit Radio. I'm your host, Jeremy DePanger, and I'm so glad you could join me today. Every episode of our show has a single goal: to discover objective truth with boldness and grace. Before we get started, I want to issue my first of two reminders for this episode that if you find this content interesting, edifying, or otherwise entertaining, please like, share, subscribe, leave a review, or all of the above. Make sure you turn on your notifications, as this is a live recording tonight. All of our episodes, at least so far, have been live. So make sure you turn on your notifications so that you're able to join us for live discussion. Whenever we go live, you can always join us on YouTube. If you're unable to join live and want to watch or listen after the fact, you can check out new and old episodes on my YouTube channel, Anchor FM, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and lately it's been a few days later, you can check them out on Google Podcasts. For whatever reason, Google Podcast is very slow at verifying episodes, so I think we're probably going to be about a week behind in terms of getting the most recent episode up for you guys. For those of you that prefer to listen to things on Apple Podcasts, on Google Podcasts, if you want to listen to the episode sooner, I'd recommend going to one of the other platforms. Just search for Precious Pursuit Radio and you'll find the latest episode right there at the top. So quick comment about chat. YouTube live chat is on, so please feel free to comment, leave questions, leave feedback. I will be monitoring that throughout the show. And I wanted to, before we jump into tonight's topic, I wanted to just offer a couple of thoughts about how the channel is going so far. So first of all, thank you to everyone that has participated. This prong of my show, this channel has really got off the ground faster than any other content I've done before. So I'm really grateful for those of you that have helped to make that happen. In my intro episode, I mentioned that I wanted to focus on content that revolves around the pursuit of truth. That involves looking at things objectively, looking at the world the way that it is, and pursuing those in a gracious and loving format. So far, our episodes have been focused on, I guess you could say, more secular topics or non-religious specific, non-spiritual specific topics. Tonight is again going to be one of those, but in the future we are going to be doing some Christian theological topics. Some of it will be Christian spirituality, some of it will be more theological or philosophical in nature, but I just want you guys to know that I'm really interested in those kinds of topics too, and so those are going to be a part of the channel going forward. I hope those of you that are not believers in Christ, that you will still come and listen to the channel. And as always, every episode is going to be uploaded, so you'll have a chance to check out all the latest content. So let's go ahead and dive into tonight's episode, which is relativism. So, relativism. This is a very common view held among people in the postmodern world. In my opinion, with society's increased emphasis on tolerance, on moral relativity, it's important that we gain an understanding of what relativism is and also what it isn't, why I believe that it's false, and why we should push back on it. If you do believe in relativism and you're on this channel, I'm glad. I hope this sparks good discussion. My only rule in the YouTube comments is that the discussion be respectful. I'm prepared for disagreement, and I hope that disagreement can lead to the truth. I just want to make sure people communicate with each other respectfully. So that's our goal tonight. Essentially three things. We're going to define what relativism is. We're going to look at why relativism is appealing and also why it is false. And then lastly, we're going to look at ways how to push back against relativism. Now, one more quick comment before we dive into those topics. this is not a one episode topic in terms of the breadth of content. There's a lot we can discuss when it comes to relativism. Tonight is really just about understanding what it is, why it's wrong, and how we can push back against it. However, this is going to expand later on into other topics such as a deeper dive into moral relativism, moral arguments, theism, atheism, reasons to believe in God based on objective morality, issues of that nature. So we're going to dive into those topics, and I'm really excited because I love those discussions. I've really enjoyed reading philosophical works on those issues over the years. Tonight is sort of just a primer on it. Later on, we'll dive deeper. Okay, so without further ado, let's dive into our first section, which is going to be defining terms, as is important in any discussion that involves, any discussion period. It's important that we define our terms. So the first term that I want to define is, what does it mean to be objective? Well, objective, the term objective means that the statement is true whether you believe it or not. In other words, belief or opinion is entirely unrelated to whether the thing is true or not. So, for example, behind me you can see the curtains. The curtains are colored white. The curtains are white whether I choose to accept it or not. Whether any of you choose to accept it or not, they are white. That's a fact. So we would say that that the statement, the curtains are white, is an objective statement. The second definition that's going to be important for our discussion tonight is subjective. So anything that is subjective is a matter of opinion. There isn't a definitive answer. It is up to one's own perspective or opinion how to address the issue. So depending on the context, there may be different views or a way to approach things. So a subjective statement would be, again, using the example of the curtains, I like the design of the curtains, or the design of the curtains is good. Those are subjective statements. They're my personal preference. Someone else may be looking at this and thinking, gosh, those curtains are really ugly. I didn't choose them. Those curtains are ugly. That is a subjective statement for that person as well. There is no objective standard for assessing whether one likes or doesn't like the curtains. It's simply a matter of preference. The third definition that we're going to look at tonight is relative. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is because I want to make sure that we distinguish between relativism, which is a system of philosophy, a system of philosophical belief, and relative, which is just a statement about a comparison between two things. So, for something to be relative, it is a comparison of one thing to another with an external standard of measurement. So, for example, I can say that I am taller than my son, or I am tall relative to my son, who is 3 years old. He's about 3 feet and a few inches. I'm just shy of 6 feet, so I would say I am tall relative to my son. Relative statements are not necessarily relativistic or under the branch of relativism, as long as there's an implicit reference to an objective standard. So let's look at that a little more carefully. When I say I am tall relative to my son, how do I know that that statement is true? Well, because it's referencing an external standard. What's the external standard? Well, height is an objective measurement. So when I said that I'm just shy of 6 feet, he's just above 3 feet, we are both using an external objective standard to determine what our height is, and therefore what our height is relative to each other. So relative statements can still be valid. They can still be objectively true statements, they aren't necessarily relativistic. So that's why I don't want us to fall into the mistake of thinking that anything that is relative in nature, or just using the term relative, is in itself bad. That's not true for the example that I just gave. The final definition I want to offer is that of tonight's topic, which is relativism. So relativism is the belief that knowledge, truth, morality, in essence, all things are functions of context and are not absolute or objective. So when you hear people say things like, X is true for me, but not for you, I believe that X, but you may believe otherwise, those are relativistic statements. Now, sometimes they're by nature subjective, and that's okay. Where the rubber meets the road is when someone tries to make an issue of fact into an issue of belief or preference. So, for example, the curtains behind me. Again, we'll go back to this many times. The curtain behind me is white. If I say it's true for me that it's green, but it may be true for you that it's white, I don't agree with you that it's white. For me, it's green. That's where relativism is a problem. Because you can see there's an objective way of measuring of determining what color the curtain is. And the person claiming that they believe that it's green is denying that external objective standard of determination or standard of measurement. So when the person starts to do that, they fall into relativism, and that's where we have an issue. So I want to clarify a couple of things, because these are, I find these to be equivocated often. One is that disagreement is not relativism necessarily. So sometimes there is an issue of perspective or of partial truth or partial perspective in which someone may disagree, not because they don't believe there's an objective standard, but because maybe we don't have all the evidence yet. Maybe we haven't dug deep enough. Maybe we haven't discussed the issue enough. Maybe the terms haven't been defined well enough. There's a variety of different reasons that we could disagree about something, but disagreement itself is not relativism, even though under relativism, people disagree all the time because things are a matter of belief and preference, not a matter of fact. So you're going to find even more disagreement, but disagreement itself is not relativism. The next point I want to make is that skepticism, whether it's moral skepticism, epistemological skepticism, whatever the kind of skepticism is not relativism. So relativism is the belief that there are no objective or absolute standards, there is nothing objective. Skepticism does not deny that some beliefs are absolutely true, or there are facts, objective things. Skepticism just denies that we can ever be sure which beliefs are true. So in essence, skepticism is almost the polar opposite of relativism. Skepticism accepts that there's objective reality. It just says we can't know what it is. The final point is that, and I mentioned this before we jumped into defining terms, that relativism as it relates specifically to morality is something that we will cover in a later episode. I absolutely want to cover moral relativism, moral arguments for the existence of God, and atheism, all of those topics. In fact, we might even have an episode for each one of those three that I just said. I'm not sure yet. But those are topics that I definitely want to cover in future episodes. So we're not going to be focusing on those particulars tonight. But don't be disappointed. If you did want to go there, we are going to cover that in the future. Okay, so we've defined our terms. Again, a very important step for anybody to do when they're trying to discuss, especially in areas where you know in advance that there's going to be disagreement. I would be surprised if we agreed on everything that I say tonight. We've defined our terms, so now the next thing we need to do is talk about why relativism is appealing. Because if this was just a theoretical belief that no one held, I wouldn't be doing this episode. A lot of people are relativists, and a lot of people have reasons for being relativists. There are things about relativism that on their surface at least are appealing. So I want to at least acknowledge those to understand why relativism has the weight and the power, at least in our modern or postmodern world, that it does. So the first reason that relativism is appealing is because it offers a sense of freedom from authority. Relativism really appeals to people that want to free themselves from any external standard or authority. So if someone was to say something like, why should I follow your standard of morals? That's something that is levied against Christians all the time. Why should I listen to what the Bible says? Independent of whether you think that the Bible is valid or it has historical data in it, whatever, people say, well, why should I follow those morals over and above my own personal sense of morality, my own conscience, whatever myself tells myself is true? The second reason why, and that's of course freeing, or at least on the surface, that's our perception, that it frees us from being bound or shackled to systems of belief that we may not agree with. And it gives us the justification to ignore authority when it doesn't jive with what we believe, which is becoming a more and more common thing, at least in America. The second reason why relativism is appealing is because there's a focus on self-interest. Relativism allows us to exalt our own self-interests, passions, and desires. When my beliefs and my preferences are the only thing that matters, then what should I do with them? Well, I should exalt them. I should put them on a pedestal. I should focus on them. I should try to maximize them. So relativism allows us to pursue that holy grail of self-interest. The third reason why relativism is appealing is because language becomes fluid. Relativism allows for us to manipulate language to mean whatever we want it to mean. We can redefine words at will because our words don't point towards any objective reality. And we're not going to dive into issues such as transgenderism tonight, but I think that the entire hot button nature of the transgenderism debate in our country and around the world is what is at the core of that, I believe, is relativism at its purest, meaning actual relativism, raw relativism, and the belief that language is fluid in a way that we've never really accepted or never really seen language as. Yes, language changes, meanings of words change. Certain words are considered okay or not okay throughout history, but there's a way in which words are being manipulated and the meaning of them is being manipulated to the point where they don't point towards anything objective. So I don't want to go too far down that path tonight because I don't want to give the sense that I'm not going to give fairness in discussing that topic. That may be a topic later on this show, but my point is to just say that under relativism, language can mean whatever we want it to mean. And if we're offended by something, we can say that we're offended. If we want to believe that it means something, we can say that, and we're not shackled to what it is. Again, it's sort of that freedom from authority again. It points back to that. It's like we don't have to Merriam-Webster is not our authority anymore. We can believe that words mean whatever we want them to mean. The fourth and final reason, and this may not be comprehensive, but these are the four predominant reasons I think why relativism is appealing. The fourth one is that relativism offers the promise of tolerance. And I put tolerance in quotes because I think that the kind of tolerance that relativism claims to support is actually self-defeating, but we'll get to that in a moment. If there is no objective standard or objective reality, and what matters is what I believe and what my preferences are, then tolerance for other people believing other things becomes that much more important. In order for us to coexist, to thrive together, to have community together, we have to have a system for accepting any random beliefs that people could have, and that's what tolerance is defined as. The willingness to accept, if not believe, what other people believe. So we've established why relativism is appealing. So now let's turn our sights on why relativism is false. So I have two main arguments here, and we can break them down. We can think about it kind of like the tip of the iceberg and then the iceberg below the ocean. Okay, we're going to attack the tip first, and then we're going to destroy the foundation after. So for someone that claims to be a pure relativist, meaning that they believe that that relativism is true, that truth equals belief, there is no objective reality, or the reality is how you perceive it. That is what is true. For people that believe in that kind of pure form of relativism, that kind of relativism is, I would argue, somewhat self-evidently self-defeating. Why is that? Well, if I say all truths are relative, that itself is an objective claim about reality. I'm saying it is true that all truths are relative. Because if that statement itself is relative, then the belief system collapses. The belief system becomes meaningless then. Because then it becomes, well, what I believe relativism isn't what you believe it is. And then it doesn't mean anything because it's simply defined by what I believe it is. So the relativism in its purest sense is a self-defeating philosophy. Now, someone might say, and this is my second point, that, okay, fine. Relativism in its purest sense is self-defeating. But what if I say that I'm willing to offer the exception to relativism as an umbrella, but then the rule applies to everything underneath it? So what do I mean by that? Well, if I say relativism is true, I'm willing to accept that there is one absolute truth, and that is that relativism is true. But then everything underneath it is a matter of belief and preference and context. Well, my argument, my response to that would be, well, that's still a self-defeating philosophy. Because imagine, here's my hypothetical. Imagine I'm the only person alive. Yay, me. Actually, that would be terrible. But imagine I was the only person alive. And I make the claim, for me, I just say it out loud because there's nobody else to talk to. I say out loud, for me, the planet Jupiter does not exist. So I'm denying the existence of Jupiter. According to relativism, the statement Jupiter does not exist is equal to the statement I believe that Jupiter does not exist. Because remember, objective reality isn't real. It's a matter of perspective. So my perspective becomes the truth. But let's think about that for a second. Fine. You can say that truth and perspective are equivalent now. But even then, it's still objectively true that I believe that Jupiter does not exist. No matter how deep you go in the layers of the onion of relativism, you're always going to have to get to a core of something that is objective. And any time that you do, and every time that you do, because you always will, you've defeated relativism, because you've identified an objective standard with which to say relativism has to be false. So let's go back to that, because this is actually really key. We've made this exception that relativism is allowed to be absolutely true, but everything underneath it can be relative. It can be a matter of belief or context or perspective. But any of the beliefs that I have, and again, this example with Jupiter matters because I'm the only person. So there's no one arguing with me that has a differing belief. It's simply objective reality on one hand and my belief on the other hand. Even if we're just to grant that truth is a matter of belief, you still can't escape the fact that it's a true statement that I believe something, that I believe that Jupiter does not exist. Independent of whether that belief is true or not or doesn't matter, it's true that I believe it. And that has to be an objective thing. It can't be a matter of perspective that I believe that something. Because in this hypothetical, the only perspective is mine. It's a world, it's a universe in which only I exist. There's no God, there's no people, it's just me and the universe. There's no other perspective here. It's just mine. So the belief has to be true. The fact that there is a belief has to be true, independent of whether the belief itself is true. So that's the key. And the point of all of this is to say that no matter how many layers of the onion you peel off, you always get to a solid, rock-hard core that spoils the onion, because relativism cannot be true, given those two arguments. Okay, so let's transition to our final point tonight, which is pushing back against relativism. So we've established what it is. We've established why it's false. So now we need to establish why we should push back on it. Why does it matter that we argue against relativism? Why does it matter that we stand up for objective reality and objective truth? I think there's three reasons. And again, when we do these 30-minute episodes, I'm never going to say, or almost never going to say, that the list of reasons or list of arguments that I have is comprehensive or all-inclusive. There's always going to be things I leave out. The points that I'm making, I have to cut them down to a list that I think is doable in a 30-minute time frame. So if you think of other reasons, by all means, put them in the YouTube comments. Engage in the conversation and add to the conversation by adding those points. I'm simply putting the points that I think are the most prominent, or at least prominent, in the discussion. So the first reason why I think we should push back against relativism is because it's simply not a sound philosophy. It's simply false. We should always push back against things that are not true. As goes along with the theme of this show, Precious Pursuit Radio, we're pursuing truth with boldness and grace. We're pursuing truth. So, of course, I have the motivation to push back against things that are false. And any belief system that is not sound, that is not based on truth, should be rejected. I think there's a deeper layer to this point, though, in that, yes, it is false, but I don't think the reason people accept relativism, or the reason that people go for it, is because they think it's sound philosophy. I think people believe it because it's emotionally gratifying. It gives us all the freedom in the world to do and say and believe whatever we want and to construct our own reality and our own system of morality. What could be better than that? Or at least, that's what we think. The second reason we need to push back against relativism is because it emphasizes self over truth. Relativism is a tool. I see it simply as a tool to free ourselves, or supposedly free ourselves, from authority and to exalt ourselves and our interests, passions, desires as being of prime importance. Why would I reject that? Well, there's a lot of reasons, and I don't have enough time to go into all of them now. But any philosophical system, any belief system that emphasizes self over others is, generally speaking, going to be false. There are so many reasons why we should be not focused on self-interest, but on the good of others, on loving others, on having grace towards others, on working with others, identifying truth so that we can establish a baseline with others that far exceed the importance of pursuit of self-gratification, passions, desires, things that leave us the most selfish people in the world. This system of belief should be rejected because it emphasizes self over truth. And this point alone could be an entire episode. But suffice it to say that believing your interests at all times, your beliefs, are so important that they warrant rejecting objective truth. It's ultimately not going to get you anywhere. And it's only going to hurt other people. The third reason we should push back against relativism is that, as we talked about earlier, language starts to mask truth. Under relativism, because what I believe a word means is more important than what it actually means to other people, or its established, commonly accepted definition, language becomes a tool to cover indifference to the truth. In other words, if language demonstrates, or language does its part in demonstrating that something is true, but we don't like that it's true, we can change the words. We can change their meaning so that it is no longer true. And once we've muddied the waters with our change of language, then we no longer have a common ground to operate. Because ultimately, any discussion that we have about truth can't be done without language. I can't do this podcast without language. Language that we commonly understand. And I think that under relativism, language just becomes more and more gibberish to the point where we fail to see truth, we mask the truth, and we live in this moral puddle. So that's my teaser. That's my teaser for future episodes where we're going to discuss morality and objective truth and theism and moral arguments based on morality, arguments for the existence of God based on morality. We don't have time to get into that tonight, but I think that language matters a lot and will be relevant for any future discussions that we have on this topic. I'm so excited to dive into this. I think this is so important, not just as a philosophical exercise for us to understand why a belief system is false, but because practically speaking, this has gotten out of control. And we need to find a way to reestablish a baseline. And the only way we can do that is by pushing back against this false belief system and reestablishing a way to discuss objective truth. And I hope that if there's even one takeaway from tonight, it's that discussing this issue, discussing relativism, can help us to take one step towards reestablishing that baseline. So that about wraps it up for our discussion tonight on relativism, episode 4. Please leave your thoughts and feedback in the comments below. I've already seen some comments these last few weeks that have helped me with the show. I've received some feedback from some folks. I really appreciate that. I'm trying to do everything I can each week to make the show better, to mold it into something that's edifying and productive and a blessing to anyone that chooses to listen. So thank you to those of you that have offered feedback. And thank you to those of you who are able to join live tonight. I will always do my best to respond to comments if they are given. If you did miss the episode tonight and you missed the live discussion, fear not. You can always post comments after the fact, and you can always watch or listen later on here on my YouTube channel, Anchor FM, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. And like I said early on in the episode, if you liked the content tonight, if you thought it was edifying, if you thought it was even just, helped you to think a little bit more about the topic, or you just enjoyed it, please like, subscribe, tell a friend, tell them that you enjoyed the content, tell them to come check it out, join our community. It would really help to build the channel and make this into something bigger. I'm so passionate about that. I want to reach people. I want to talk with people. I think these issues are so important. Why not bring more people into the fold? So if you like the content, please like the YouTube video. And that's about it for tonight. Thank you guys so much. And until next time, God bless.